Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, so Mrs. Uwais, if I could please invite you to come on stage. So respected ladies and gentlemen, good day and welcome to the national debate on poverty reduction, a high-level event of the 27th Nigerian Economic Summit, jointly organized by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, as well as the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning. My name is Lele Balde. I work with Business Day Media, and I'm the editor of the Business Day Weekender. Thank you for having me as your event host. Joining me on this panel will be Mrs. Mariam Uwais, MFR, Special Advisor to the President on Social Investments. Could we please put our hands together for Mrs. Uwais? And also, Mr. Efosa Odromo, who is the team lead at the Global Prosperity Research Group, Clayton Institute for Disruptive Innovation, Boston, USA. So Mr. Efosa is joining us from Zoom. So Efosa, could you please wave to the audience so that they can see you? Awesome. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Efosa. So today is a very exciting day. We're here to talk about national poverty reduction. Essentially, how do we get Nigeria to no longer be a poor country? Despite many initiatives, past and present, Nigeria records a significantly high number of multidimensionally poor people, characterized by pervasive inequality and polarity across regions and gender. It is imperative to rethink every step taken in the past and establish an enduring state's capacity through a coherent evidence-based contextual framework with a defined poverty reduction strategy. Nigeria has an estimated population of 200 million people, with 40.9% living below the poverty line. 42.5 between the ages of 0 to 14, and 60% are below the ages of 25 years. The country has one of the highest youth population in the world. As reported by the National Bureau of Statistics, the NBS, the 2018 and 2019 household survey, we have about 82.9 million Nigerians currently living in poverty. Considering the food poverty line and cost of non-food basic needs, the poverty line was set at 137,430 per person per year as the national standard. And I know that many of us sitting in this room that flew in from Lagos or our respective places probably spent about that same amount just to get here. So just to put it in perspective, 137,430 is considered to be the national standard. This translates to a national poverty line of 11,425 per month, which amounts to 381 naira per day. Thus, the poverty line set by NBS is less than the minimum wage of 30,000 naira per month. About 53.3 Nigerians are multidimensionally poor and are at a heightened risk of falling below the poverty line. The wealth of any country is intrinsically linked to the health and well-being of its people. It is therefore paramount that for any society and economy to thrive, there needs to be a clearly defined standard of living in line with global benchmarks to understand how people really experience poverty. Our focus today is on the most vulnerable in society, which has a multidimensional approach towards people living at the bottom of the pyramid. People living on less than $1 a day. And mind you that the dollar of yesterday is not the dollar of today. Minors under the age of 18, pregnant women and children, people living with disability, displaced people due to insecurity and national disasters, unemployed or underemployed young people, and anyone over the age of 65. So essentially today we're here to answer some very important questions. Should Nigeria adopt a social protection approach or a market-led approach to poverty reduction, and why? It is imperative to change the pejorative narrative of Nigeria into a proper and sustainable system. We want to chart a course for innovative and inclusive, diverse poverty reduction strategies, and at a national and subnational level with acceptable social protection floors. We want to identify and build on consensus for a feasible strategy and pathway for the country. So as I mentioned, I have two very exciting experts joining the panel. Allow me to introduce Mrs. Mariam Uwais, who is the MFR, Special Advisor to the President on Social Investments. Mrs. Mariam Uwais is currently the Special Advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari on social investments. She's an experienced legal practitioner and human rights activist, having been called to the bar in the year 1981. Mrs. Mariam supervised 4 of the federal government's social investment programs from November 2015 to October 2019. She currently serves as the coordinator of the Poverty and Social Protection Technical Working Group and chair of the Social Development Cluster. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us today. And Mr. Ifosa Ojomo leads the Global Prosperity Research Group at the Clayton Christensen Institute for Disruptive Innovation, a Boston and Silicon Valley-based think tank. He is also the co-author of How Innovation Can Lift Nations Out of Poverty, that was published in January 2019. So let's put our hands together again for Ifosa, who is joining us from the US via Zoom. So I'm going to join Mrs. Uwais onto the stage so that we can start this very interesting debate. What poverty reduction strategy should Nigeria adopt? Let's have a look at what poverty looks like in Nigeria. The 2018-2019 household survey statistics revealed that 82.9% of the people living below the poverty line are impoverished. What does it really entail to be poor? An important question that means different things to different people. Multidimensional poverty gives an even broader picture of what the poverty narrative is in Nigeria, looking beyond income to understand how people experience poverty in multiple and simultaneous ways. About 53.3% of Nigerians are multidimensionally poor and are at a heightened risk of falling below the poverty line, as seen and evidenced during the COVID-19 pandemic. With a declining number of the economically active population and booming youthful population, the multidimensional poverty indices of Nigeria are further aggravated by the continuous oil-led dynamics and low socioeconomic inclusion in setting the inadequacies of the National Social Protection Framework. This reality calls for an innovative and contextually appropriate poverty reduction strategy for the country. Do we rely on government-driven social protection, or do we lean towards a market-led response? Essentially, this debate seeks to highlight the divergent options to revitalizing Nigeria's social welfare system, giving the competing social objectives vis-à-vis protection of the population, promotion of economic activity through diversification and industrialization, as well as an enhanced social protection framework. So this is what will frame our discussion for today. So Ms. Mariam, with this picture of poverty in Nigeria that I've painted, we have to set a tone for today's debate. May I have the pleasure of getting your perspective on what I have just said?
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Minister, DG, and everyone here, including the media. The statistics you read out are very valid. And we supervised from the Office of the Vice President the poverty or social investment programs, 4 social investment programs between November 2015 and October 2019. And in that period, we were able to impact on 13 million, over 13 million direct beneficiaries, and over 44 million secondary beneficiaries, being farmers, cooks, families, aggregators. We had also the teachers. There was a huge value chain that we were able to calculate, working with people who were technology savvy. So we had these 4 programs, the Empower program, which worked with, which empowered 500,000 Nigerians, young Nigerians, working in the education, health, and agri sectors. We had the non-graduate, over 100,000. Then we had the school feeding program, which employed over 107,000 cooks and fed 13 million children. And of course, you can't even talk about the value chain, the feeding that happened from the small farmer who aggregated their foods at the farm gate through these cooks. Then we had the cash transfer program, and because we noticed that in the past it was very ad hoc, we began the National Social Register, and the National Social Register has grown. It's been also funded by the World Bank. Some of the loan also supported the setting up of the social register. We have 44 million individuals now on the social register, and this social register is just amazing because it identifies poor and vulnerable households. It has the data of the gender, the head of the household, the vocation, the ages, the size of the household, the assets that they have, the living conditions, all the things that you mentioned in the MPI. It's very important for us to have that baseline so that we're able to plan. And beyond the social register, we have a community profile that has grown. It tells how far, which of the communities have banks or banking infrastructure, access roads, the various facilities, secondaries. It's really very important. Then we had also the other, the JEEP, that's the trader money, market money, that gave petty loans to people in the markets, sorry.
Thank you very much. We're definitely very familiar with these government programs, and I definitely look forward to asking you some questions about that later. So Ifosa, I would like to come to you. Please kindly give us your opening remarks so that we can understand your perspective as we go into this debate. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, it's a little weird because I can hear myself on echo.
We can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear myself echoing. So I'll try to. Okay, this is better. Yeah. Thank you very much. It's good to be here. To all the honorables in the crowd listening, thank you for having me. I'm not quite sure who is there, but thank you. Just a few quick points. I know we don't have a lot of time. I think one of the biggest problems with fighting poverty is that we keep talking about fighting poverty. And I think that's part of the problem. This really limits us. It limits our ability to think differently about how we can actually create prosperity for people. We see people as beneficiaries and not customers. We often see them as helpless citizens and not builders, right? Not people who can actually build the nation. And so I think the first thing we have to do is reframe the conversation, talk about prosperity, talk about the kind of Nigeria we want to live in, and then work towards building it. I'm afraid when we focus on lifting over 100 million people now out of poverty. We are just not rich enough to do it. But I'll talk about poverty today because that's what we are talking about. I think it'd be good for us to ground the conversation in some data. Um, when you look at how much the federal government of Nigeria has to spend per Nigerian per year, it's roughly around $200 per person. Um, of that money, depending on who you ask and depending on when, a significant amount goes towards servicing our debt. And so, as much as I feel the pain of the average Nigerian who may want the government to help with social investments, the government just cannot afford it. For comparison, the United States federal government spends $20,000 roughly per person per year. When you go to Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, they're spending upwards of $35,000 per person per year. There is no way we can invest enough from the federal government to lift Nigerians out of poverty. It's just not possible. It's also what we've been doing for decades, and the numbers continue to increase. And so I think we need a very different strategy. But what is that strategy? I think the strategy needs to focus on innovation, and specifically what in our research we call market creating innovation. These are innovations that help make products simple and affordable, so many more people in society can afford the products and they ultimately buy them. They create markets, they hire people who have jobs. And at the end of the day, these people pay taxes, and that the taxes go towards increasing that $200 per year per person number that the government spends. And then the government can start to spend in social programs. Now, if you take a step back and think about what we are currently doing when we try to spend our way out of this problem, we are essentially fixing the symptoms of the problem. We are not focused on the root cause. We are not focused on the root cause. And the root cause, when you look at how every wealthy country today has been able to create prosperity and root out poverty, they have done it through investing in market-driven approaches. Market-driven approaches. And so I'm going to sort of round up my comments by saying, and I'd love if there's only one thing you get from me today, I want it to be this. The best thing we can do in Nigeria for poor people is to profit from them.
Thank you, Ifosa.
The best thing you can do for poor people in Nigeria is to profit from them. Now, I don't mean the best thing we can do is to exploit them. Very big difference. It's to profit from them. Now, when you create a product or a service that a poor person can bring into their lives and can pay for with their very limited resources, it forces you as a creator, as an innovator, as an entrepreneur to wake up every day and have empathy for that person, think about that person, the resources they have. And you essentially have to figure out a way to create a product so compelling that they are willing to part ways with the scarce resource that they have.
Ifosa,
that is how
so
we
much.
create markets. That is how we build wealth and prosperity.
Yeah.
And so I think at the end of the day, we definitely need the government. We need the government to spend, to make social investments, but we can't do it right now.
Okay.
Um,
Well
so-
noted. So we'll definitely, thank you for your points. So one thing that you said that stood out to me was that the best thing that we can do for poor people in this country is make money from them. So I'm going to hold you to that, and I would like Mrs. Uwais to respond to what you said. But before we go on to do that, I'd like to say that we're also engaging the audience to sound their opinion. So please take the poll if you're watching us online. What do you think should be the pathway for Nigeria for poverty reduction? So please, let's get our audience to vote on that so that we can come back after the session, during the session, to figure out what everybody thinks. So Ifosa, you made an interesting point, and I'm sure Mrs. Uwais, you'd like to respond. The best thing that we can do for Nigeria's poor people is make money from them. That's a very bold statement to make, and I'm sure that Mrs. Uwais has something she'd like to say about that. So over to you, Mrs. Uwais.
Well, I wish that we could make money from them. There are many, many Nigerians from the statistics that are not able to even make money for themselves, not to talk of make money for others. Many of them live below the poverty line and they need a lift up, and this is why government comes in. You have to support them. They are just as entitled as you and I to government support. And for many of them, there are many structural issues. You know, the fact that the states are autonomous, so it's not one social space in that sense. There has to be a national approach rather than a federal approach. There has to also be a way of convincing the people in government and even the private sector, I would say, to also prioritize the intangibles. You know, when states budget for education, for instance, there's a lot of focus on infrastructure. And I'm not saying infrastructure is not important, but you could build a school in a poor community and it will remain empty because the children will go to the farm. And unless you can address the poverty that the father has, is going through, that child will not go to school. Mm-hmm. So it's very important. Well, the infrastructure is where the legacies lie, it's where the contracts are. So there's a lot of prioritization on infrastructure, and it doesn't help that we have a 4-year term. Measuring quality and improving a lot of things that have to do with improving education, it happens over a period of time, and the politicians just don't have the time to do that. The private sector also wants to look at returns on investment, wants to see how much they can make as fast as possible. When we ran the school feeding and the cash transfer program, we actually got EPRI to make a business case so that the private sector could engage and support. But it was a really hard task. I was so excited yesterday when I saw the PIU being institutionalized by the Economic Summit Group, because there is a context to everything, and it's not one size fits all. You cannot just presume that everyone will be able to do certain things. We need to look at the context and draw the linkages between the drivers of poverty and the outcomes. That's the only way we can support people out of poverty, get them involved and engaged in productive ventures. And this has to be done for us to be able to make money from them.
Thank you, Mrs. Uwais. Thank you for that. So one of the things that you said is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. No. And that's really the reason why we're here today, is to try to figure out the best way to reduce poverty in the country. So you're coming at it from a social perspective. Ifosa is coming at it from, I would call it, a capitalist perspective. And I think that's totally okay. Both can be valid. Ifosa, would you like to respond to Mrs. Uwais?
Yes, I would love to bring the audience attention to the last comment Mrs. Uwais said, which was, we have to make money from it. And so she described all the programs and then said, we have to make money from it. I think the reason I say the best thing we can do is to profit from the poor, I understand that it's provocative, is because we need a fundamental paradigm shift. If we do not have this paradigm shift, Nigeria will continue to be a poor country until we die, until our kids die. We need to understand how economies evolve. If you go back a few hundred years, every single country was poor. The life expectancy was 30, 35 years old. In today, the richest country in the world, the United States, go back to the 1900s, and the average woman had 5, 6, 7 children. The average American was a subsistence farmer. Um, there were no hospitals, there were no roads, there was no infrastructure. The government was more corrupt than the Nigerian government is today, at least according to Transparency International. I think many wealthy country governments are still incredibly corrupt. They just figure out ways to call the corruption something different. And so, what we have to do as a nation, if we are serious about poverty, is ask ourselves simple questions. How did poor United States, England, Norway, how did they evolve into prosperous countries today? What we will find is the government at the time did not have the burden of lifting 100, 200 million people out of poverty. It's just a burden, no matter how well intentioned we are, we cannot do. Now, if you asked me to help you out with a serious problem and you needed me to give you $1 million, no matter how well intentioned I may be, and I would want to help, I cannot afford it. Nigeria cannot afford to lift millions of people out of poverty. So the question then becomes, what can we afford to do? We can afford to create markets. The government can figure out ways to truly spur investments in innovators and entrepreneurs. Help them create markets like we've done with mobile telcos. When mobile telcos came into the picture, they were seen as luxury toys for the rich, not 9 knots, GSM. Now, many of the poor people who we are trying to help have mobile phones. That's what I mean by creating a new market that profits from the poor, that helps them solve the deep problems in their lives. If we don't start thinking this way, I'm afraid we will go in with amazing hearts, but at the end of the day, the impact we are going to make on the country will be minuscule, it will be next to nothing, and we will continue to remain poor. We have to change the paradigm. If we don't, I'm afraid Nigeria will not make progress on poverty goals.
Thank you, Ifosa. So if I hear you correctly, you believe in teaching people how to fish as opposed to giving them fish.
Absolutely.
I hear you.
One quick response to that, because I think this is important. Sometimes we synonymize poor people with stupid. Because a person is poor doesn't mean they're not stupid. They're stupid. Doesn't mean they can't work. Doesn't mean they can't provide. Some of the poorest Nigerians are the most hardworking Nigerians. And so, what we have to figure out how to do, we who are the elite, the elite Nigerians, we have to figure out how to create a system that truly unleashes the power that they have so that they can climb up the economic ladder. So yes, we have to teach people how to fish. Thank you.
Mrs. Uwais, over to you. So what do you say to people, for example, who say that the government social protection programs have been ongoing and poverty levels are still the same?
I find there's a huge disconnect. A lot of people in the towns look down on 5,000 naira a month. They believe that nothing is happening. One of the mistakes I made, I believe, is not prioritizing communication, because we did have a huge, we had feedback from those who actually went to the communities to find that they were actually making money for themselves. With that 5,000, in 19 states, we had women who had savings groups, over 18,000 of them, less than 500 of them were defaulting. Mm-hmm. Because we also trained a lot of people in the local governments to hold their hands, to teach them financial literacy, to teach them about entrepreneurship, to advise them on what percentage they could invest, what they could save, and what they could spend on their everyday needs. So there was a lot that was going on, and I think there's this thing about us, thinking that, as he said, maybe they're stupid. I've never seen so much energy. I was very impressed. They saved money, built schools, renovated schools, did boreholes, did a lot of, even bought cars, vehicles for women in communities where there was no hospital nearby. They used to push their women on wheelbarrows that were pregnant to get to the roads. And these poor women put their money together and bought a vehicle so that they could transport themselves. And they worked out who would pay, how much, who would pay the driver, who would buy fuel and all of that. So there's a lot that goes on in those communities that we actually don't feel is impact. Mm-hmm. The thing about poverty is it's not the same in every community.
Okay.
And so the social register actually measures poverty according to what the community thinks is poor, rather than some defined rate that is produced at this level. And right. So it's really good that we're looking at the MPI rather than consumption mm-hmm. and income, because there's so much more to that.
So thank you for those points. And I think you make a great point in the sense that probably communication should have been at the forefront, because I think, like many of you in the room, sometimes we hear about these government programs, but we're not exactly sure, who these people are, what their stories are. So sometimes some of these programs seem so far removed from reality because we don't know who these people are and we don't know what their stories are.
And you can't even reconcile.
Right. So I think people often have questions around who are these people that are receiving these programs? What's the impact? What's the direct impact on their lives? So I think communication definitely should be a priority. Ifosa, would you like to respond to what she has said?
Admirable. What
So we can't hear you. Could you please speak to the...
Oh, I think it's admirable what the government is doing and trying to do. I really do. The struggle is that's not the government's job. I think the government would do a lot better and do a lot more if it figured out a way to do all the things that Mrs. Owais has so eloquently said, in a way that it can remove itself from the equation, extricate itself, and let the private sector figure out how to provide many of these services. The government can trigger, right, can jumpstart it, but then excuse themselves so the private sector can create the markets, and then the government can tax the markets, can tax the people who have jobs. That's the way you get to prosperity. When you look at COVID-19 and any crisis that has happened in the world, now we're talking about the climate crisis. The conference is going to start next week. What do we do as poor countries? We go to rich countries and we beg. We beg for vaccines. We beg for hospitals. We beg, we beg, we beg. We should be tired of begging. Focusing on poverty helps us fix symptoms. It does not help us step back and create the kind of prosperity we need so that we can get to a place where Nigeria develops its own vaccines and we don't have to beg for aid. When COVID happened, Japan just printed a bunch of money and said, we're going to help the Japanese citizens. Americans printed a bunch of money and said, we're going to help Americans. That's my goal for Nigeria. My goal is not that, the poor people making $2 a day, a definition of poverty that we who are rich defined. My goal is not that they start to earn $10 a day or $12 a day. My goal is they become prosperous and have access to everything that they need to make their lives to lead prosperous lives. That should be the goal. It is a process. And I think the way we get there is by unleashing the power of the markets, Ultimately, we will tax the markets when they are created, and then we can begin to invest more in many of these social programs.
Thank you, Ifosa. So just for our audience, we asked the question, what do you think should be our approach to lifting Nigerians out of poverty? 68% of our audience here and online said that market-driven approaches to allow for competition, and 32% said government-led systems of social welfare. So thank you to our audience for answering that poll. Ifosa said something quite interesting, and he says that he wants Nigeria to stop begging for aid. That is quite profound. What do you have to say to that?
Well, honestly, I agree with him. We should stop begging for aid if we're able
So first point of agreement for today.
Yeah. I think
Let's definitely clap for that.
if we're able to block a lot of the leakages and address a lot of the corruption in the system, we will have enough money to address a lot of the issues. But I don't agree with him that we can't achieve the targets that we've set for ourselves, you know? And I must make the point about polls. The people that are voting here are elites. They understand the markets and they feel that this is the only way. If we were to engage the poor people, I assure you that they would feel that the impact that government is making on them is what is priority. And you would have seen that the numbers, the percentages for government social welfare would have gone up. And I'm not saying that it's just government that can, we need to work together to see how we can get those who are lifted out of poverty linked to the markets, because there are too many that are not able to engage with a market-driven economy.
Right.
And government has a responsibility there.
Government definitely has a responsibility there. Which brings me to my next point. Before we try to and build consensus between you and Mr. Ifosa, you know, some people are of the opinion that government sometimes makes policies from their offices, you know, and they don't necessarily have a full understanding of what the everyday person goes through, right? So, for example, the 5,000 naira conditional transfer that has been implemented throughout the years. Do you feel as though the people that are implementing these policies have a full understanding of people's realities on ground?
There's a lot of research that goes on before then. Before we started, for instance, we had gone through 26 programs run by government, and we had done an assessment of what these households usually spend, how much they earn, you know, generally. And so we had a good sense of what we could do. But there are a number of other things that need to be addressed for that money to be meaningful. And these are the other issues that government was trying to provide to see. We've started a new program now, and it was designed based on experiences in the past. We're trying to address the challenges that uneducated children on the streets, the youth, that actually, the kind that disrupted in SARS, how do we engage them? How do we make them productive? How do we stop all the substance abuse and the violence? How do we do that? We have to think innovatively. And that has to be done by people who have had the experience of, or have access to the information of what has worked and what has not worked. And again, I come back to the PIU. Context is really important. So what we're trying to do here is to get the data of 50 young people per local government who are educated but unemployed, training them on child pedagogy, on basic literacy, on M&E, on mental health, on paralegal services, on sports and life skills, security issues, getting them, building capacity at community level, and then assigning these children to them, because we all know the numbers overwhelm the state primary schools. There are too many, we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough schools, but we need youth who are compassionate, who are skilled, who understand the basic things, also vocations, entrepreneurship. So these children will be assigned to them, and they will be their mentors. They will ensure that they actually remain in school for those who will remain in school. And for those who don't, who just refuse to remain in school, because there will be many like that, especially the older ones, They will be formed into clusters or cooperatives, and they would work in spaces where they will actually thrive. This training has started in Gombe, for instance, and they're doing digital skills. We're trying to get them into emerging markets to see that they're able to thrive, but it has to be done at community level. And this is one of the challenges that we have. Every state has the mandate constitutionally for children, for youth, for primary education, for primary health. Nigeria, the national government has to find a way of bringing everybody together, coordinating all of this, providing minimum standards, but bringing in the private sector, bringing in development partners, trying to see how we can leverage on what already exists in the state so that we can provide capacity for all of these children who have slipped through the cracks in the past. We're compelling the states to look at them to ensure that they get what they deserve. But it is not as easy as people think. Every state prioritizes what it wants in its budget, and the federal government cannot compel you to do that. So we have to work. There are many hurdles that one needs to cross. But the way it is in Nigeria, you need political buy-in, so you need the governor to buy in, and then, of course, there are other challenges that you meet with data, with people trying to politicize what is not meant to be politicized because it's about poverty reduction. But I think the government has got it right. It's come up with the National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy, and it's got the states in that steering committee. It's chaired by the vice president. So it's really, I see it as a real possibility that we will be able to do at least 34 million in the next, it's about getting
In the next how many years?
In the next 5 years. It's 2015.
So you're saying that
Sorry, not 20, yes.
in the next 5 years,
No,
we
in
will
the
have
next 5
lifted
years.
34 million people out
Yes,
of poverty.
this 100 million is in 10 years. He doesn't say that. EFOSA, it's in 10 years, it's not overnight. But if you can stimulate productive activity in the local governments, you don't have to get to the $2, but you can get to where people are productively engaged and they're making money for themselves. That is a start.
So Mrs. Uwe seems confident that in the next 5 years, we will lift 34 million people out of poverty through the current efforts that the government is exhibiting. Ifosa, I know you definitely have something you want to say, so just hold that thought. I just have a question for you, because we talked about cooperation and youth. We often hear about experts talking about that cooperation is the most essential element for Nigeria's successful response to security challenges. Now, you mentioned the NSAS protest. So poverty and insecurity are directly tied to each other. Al Jazeera wrote an article that 1 year later, after the NSAS protest, young Nigerians say that they are still victims of police brutality and their demands for systemic reforms have not been met. How do we tackle insecurity, especially when poverty is directly tied to insecurity?
So I think we should address poverty, right? One of the training components that we have is actually on security for the youth. But I think, another thing that we're working closely with the UNODC, they have an out-of-school program, a school for out-of-school children that has worked very successfully in about 11 countries, called Lulu. They do sports, and they train coaches to debrief children after. And they've had the coaches, we've invited coaches from 5 states. They actually are able to make children self-aware of values that are important, life skills for navigating the issues that come across. So you're sitting in a room and everybody's smoking and they pass the cigarette to you and you don't know how to get out of it. You don't want to, but you don't want to appear weak. How do you address that? All of those issues, they've done a lot of training, and that training is being cascaded down to other coaches within the state. That has been very successful in curbing violence, it's been successful in curbing substance abuse. You find that a lot of these youth that disrupt these, they're angry, and I could say, validly so, because the country has not actually engaged them and supported them. But if you're able to get them, I mean, to play sports, to do things that actually give them a sense of, belonging and enable them to take ownership of their lives, I feel that there will be reduced violence, there'd be reduced all of these issues that are erupting in our communities. We've left it rather late, but it's not too late. And I'm really hopeful that we will be able to address many of these issues as time goes on. It just doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Uwais. So, Ifosa, I would like you and Mrs. Uwais to try and find a common ground. I mean, I know that you've highlighted what you think the cons are from her perspective, and she's definitely highlighted what she believes the cons are from your capitalist view. So I would like you guys to engage and try and see if there's a common ground. What is the middle ground? Would it be impact investing? What does it look like? Let's talk about what the middle ground would look like. And I would like you guys to please talk to one another.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, the echo is still there. There's something you do.
Do you have a device, a separate device that's on,
Okay, perfect.
perhaps?
I think it's muted now. Yes, first of all, I want to be very clear that I think Mrs. Uwais and the government, at least the ones who care within the government, are incredibly hardworking. They are working very, very hard. I don't think it's possible for you to do all the things she said without working hard. But here's the problem with that. I started this by saying we have $200 per person per year to spend. I don't think we are going to be able to take whatever is left of that after we pay salaries, after we pay service our debt, after we try to build whatever roads. There's not much left for these social spendings. We are borrowing a ton of money that we cannot pay back. There is huge unemployment that continues to increase in Nigeria. That's what's at the root cause of NSARS. People who are poor who cannot find jobs. And the government is working hard on all these other solutions when there is something they can do to trigger the innovation and innovative prowess of the average Nigerian. And that's what I'm afraid is not happening. We are allocating our resources on so many programs that are trying to fix symptoms of a much deeper problem. So yeah, we will make some progress. Yes, 5,000 Naira will help one or two people, but in 10 years, it will not lift 100 million people out of poverty. I'm confident in that, not because Mrs. Uwais and her team are not working hard, because we have history, we have evidence, we have facts. More Nigerians are poor today than they were 10 years ago. The Nigerian Naira is worth less today than it was 10 years ago. The average Nigerian is suffering more today than they were 10 years ago. So we can hope, but we have to ground this conversation in facts and in the happenings of what's going on day to day. Now, where we do agree is I don't think you can, it's an either or. I don't think it's the market versus the government. I actually think the two are very complementary. But I do think the government is not leveraging the power of the market so that it can invest in entrepreneurs and innovators who will create jobs. And the government can ultimately tax that and improve life for people. That's how we solve this. That's how every rich country has solved it. China right now has lifted over 1 billion people out of poverty. It tried what we are trying now for decades, nothing happened. The late 1970s, it said, let's create markets. It created markets, 1 billion people out of poverty, and now the premier is trying to redistribute. You can't redistribute what you don't have. We have nothing to give the Nigerian people. The Nigerian government is poor. Like, let's not, you cannot redistribute what you don't have. And that is my concern. If we keep going to the World Bank, the UN, begging for money, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, this program, we will not make the kind of progress we need to make. I'll end on this note. As far as I know, we're all gonna die someday. We have to figure out what we spend our time here doing. And I think we have to have a vision for Nigeria that surpasses lifting people out of poverty. Our vision has to be focused on creating the kind of prosperity for our country where we no longer need to go to anybody for help. It doesn't mean we don't collaborate with other countries, but we are a prosperous nation. I believe Nigeria can be that, but this paradigm shift has to happen. It really does.
Thank you, Fosa. So let's clap for that, definitely. Nigeria is and will be a prosperous nation. Thank you for that. So before Mrs. Mariam Uwais gives her rebuttal, I'd like to invite some experts onto our panel. So Hajia Sutura Aisha Bello holds a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from the University of Maiduguri, an MBA and MSc in Computer Information Systems from Southern New Hampshire University in the USA. She has over 30 years of experience across industries such as investment, banking, project finance, with institutions including the World Bank, OPEC Fund for International Development in Vienna, Austria. She was the PPP lead on a 72.8 million DFID-funded UK-Nigeria infrastructure advisory and is extremely passionate about poverty reduction. So let's put our hands together for Hajia Sutura, who is going to come and tell us her perspective, given what Mrs. Mariam Uwais and Ifosa have been talking about today. So on the podium, over to you. Let's put our hands together for Hajia as she comes onto the panel session.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency the Minister, thank you for having me. I'm here to speak today as a practitioner. Practitioner in the sense that I have run a foundation for over 10 years dealing with really vulnerable people. The foundation works particularly with women, widows, IDPs, but primarily we focus on the most vulnerable. I do believe that based on the arguments presented here today, that social protection and social investment is the way to go. I think it's the way to go because of the stage that we're in this country. Every country has its own unique characteristics, and I don't believe that not having private sector in here is also the way to go. But I do believe that you will need social investment in this country for a long time. The programs that are run here in terms of cash transfers, I can just take cash transfers as an example. We copied in the foundation what the government was doing with cash transfers when we realized that the amounts were small, and we tried that with women, and we've had 100% repayment rate. And all of the women that we work with, we give financial literacy training, and time again, they come back, this is my sister, my friend, everybody wants, we even work with women who are beggars. We screen them for those who are ready to leave the streets instead of begging and to learn a trade. We work with them, and they've all taken small amounts. We do what, 10,000? We copied what Trader Money did. And with 10,000 people were able to do that. The problem that we found is that people after the 10,000, they can grow their business if they had access to 20. So yes, I agree with the FOSA. You can't make money from the poor, but we can't start from ground zero with private sector. You can start with the social investment programs and move them from ground zero to a higher level. So when you come in with private sector, the government has already gotten these people from ground zero for you, and now they're at a level where they can access the support that you give, and then you can make money from poor people. And really, when you look at it, the whole world is suffering more than it's suffering in 2019. But I don't think there's any country in the world that is not trying to help its people with social investment programs. Even the United States and Europe that we're talking about, they borrow heavily, and they still use that money to help the poor, to try to lift them out with different programs. In the US, you have infants and toddlers. If you have a baby, if you're poor, 0 to 5, free Pampers, free milk, free food stamps. For our program, we make it conditional. If you access funding, your children have to be in school. So these social investment programs help to mandate some of the things which government is trying to achieve. So you want to increase school enrollment, you want to help with healthcare, immunizations and things. It helps. It helps. And at our stage of development, it's really important that we have such programs. According to the World Bank, unemployment in Nigeria is 33.3%.
It's NBS.
Up from 6.4 in 2010. You need these programs. I do believe you do need private sector, but it's not either or. It's not either or. And the government does have a social responsibility to help lift people out of poverty, which they can do, and they have been doing successfully with these programs. Yes, Madame has acknowledged that communication in terms of how successful the programs have been probably could be improved. But for us that work with the poor people, we have seen the impact of what small amounts can do. Because a lot of the really, really poor really don't have access. They're outside this economy that's growing. So if we want to really lift people out of poverty, we have to bring them into the economy. And how do we do that? If you're a person who has no access to funding, where do you go? Where do you go to build a business? Someone's trying to build a business, he needs 3,000 or 5,000 to set up a small business. He has no one to get that money from. So I think looking at those amounts negates the effect that it has on poverty, on the lives of people. The World Bank also did a study recently in the Northwest looking at cash transfers. They were looking at, okay, if we give it monthly, if we give it quarterly, but they found out that based on those cash transfers, there was an increase in daily per capita consumption, food security improved, and most importantly for me, food diversity. Poor people were able to afford a wider variety of foods. We all grew up seeing young kids in the village with kwashoko, a wider variety of foods, because now you have access to a little bit more income so you can access a wider variety of foods, which helps the whole family. So I do think we should look at social investment as the way to go for this country for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Hajia Sutura. We have heard of a government-led approach. Essentially, what you're saying is that a little goes a long way. So I'd like to invite Maria Glover, who is the project lead at the Impact Investors Foundation of Nigeria. Maria heads the secretariat of the Impact Investors Foundation of Nigeria, which is essentially in charge of implementing the foundation's vision and strategies, as well as project coordination. The foundation is a non-profit organization established by partnerships consisting of the Ford Foundation, Africa Capital Alliance, Business Day Media, Bank of Industry, and Dalberg. She joined IIF after serving as the first executive secretary at the Knowledge Exchange Center and has extensive experience in retail, corporate, and investment banking, having worked at FBN Merchant Bankers as well as Zenith Bank. So please join me in welcoming Maria Glover, project lead at the Impact Investors Foundation. So Maria, over to you with your perspective about what we've been talking about today.
Thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. Permit me to stand on the already existing protocols. I've really enjoyed today's debates between Mrs. Uwais and Efosa. And I just want to delve on some points that they made. Mrs. Uwais said the government comes in to lift people out of poverty. And my question is, where is the government going to get that funds from to lift people out of poverty? Bringing this to the SDG, the UNDP values the amount we need as a country to achieve the SDG, which is about 300 billion US dollars, around 125 trillion naira. And what is our approved budget for this year, our deficit budget? 6.2 trillion naira, which is largely financed by borrowings. No government in this world is able to fund totally social investments. Now, linking to the point of what Efosa said, that we need innovative thinking to get us out of poverty. And there's no either or. I tend to really agree with that. And talking about innovative thinking, my sphere is in impact investing as a more sustainable way of investing. More investors around the world are embracing impact investing as a more sustainable way. And by impact investing, we mean those investments into companies, projects that have the intention to generate measurable positive social and environmental impacts alongside financial returns. So there's no sacrifice for profit. Rather, it is something that we do side by side. Looking at the market globally, the impact investing market, it ranges between over 700 billion US dollars to $2 trillion. In Nigeria, it is valued at about $4.7 billion. There are opportunities for more growth, but due to the unfavorable market and macroeconomic challenges, we have not seen impact investing actually being deployed to solving our social and environmental challenges. We talk about insecurity, we talk about lack of access to food security, insecurity, lack of access to affordable housing, education, and critical services that we need at the base of the pyramid. The government cannot fund that. There's no fund anywhere to do that. How do we work with the private sector to unleash investment in those areas? And impact investing is that capital that brings all of these persons to the table.
Let them know about
By creating the right blend of finance. Everyone has their own intention, their own ambition, but we must bring holders of philanthropic capital, development finance institutions who dominate the space of impact investing in Nigeria. 80% of the capital deployed for impact investing is deployed by development finance institutions. Coming into a market like Nigeria, they're very commercial in focus, deploying funds in sectors with high absorptive capital, infrastructure, fintech, renewable energy, to the neglect of sectors like health, education. We want more private sector participation. It is only the private sector that can unleash huge capital to solve our social, environmental challenges that we have as a country. And if we do not deliberately unlock opportunities for the private sector to bring in that colossal capital we need, I'm afraid, just like Efosa said, we will remain poor. My question is, how much has 5,000 naira been able to do in lifting the recipients out of poverty? How many of them have moved a step higher after receiving 5,000 naira? That's not the kind of growth we want to see. Has impact investing worked? Yes. I will give you an example here in Nigeria. There are close to 70 impact investors deploying about $4.7 billion in impact capital, investing in sectors like agriculture, fintech, education, and others. An example of a recipient of impact capital is Babangona. I'm sure many of you here have heard about Babangona, a company in the agricultural sector. What is their role? To address low economies of scale in agriculture, giving smallholder farmers access to education, finance, and the market. Is it a company? Yes. What is their revenue? About 21.6 million US dollars. They have received impact capital from a wide range of investors, development finance institutions, PEVCs, and foundations have funded them. What is the impact of Babangona? And I'll tell you a bit of it. Close to 300,000 jobs have been created by Babangona. 16,000 loans have been disbursed to smallholder farmers. The earnings have increased. Over 350 acres of farms held by smallholder farmers have been aggregated. And they've reached out to about millions of people in the local communities. Babangona intends to reach out to 1 million smallholder farmers in the next 10 years. That, my friends, is impact. That's the only, we have like 10 Babangonas in Nigeria. That is about 3 million jobs being created. We do not need the government. In fact, the government cannot fund social investments. However, we need a blend of the right kinds of capital. We need the government to create the enabling environment. We need the government to address the macroeconomic indices that makes it impossible or difficult for impact capital to come into Nigeria. We need the government to create right policies. And policy does three things for us. If we get the government to recognize impact investing as the most sustainable way of investing, we can drive impact capital towards priority sectors. We can increase the demand for impact capital. We can also strengthen impact capital. Just to look at a country where impact capital has been recognized, there are several of them: Brazil, Belgium, Canada, Dubai, Netherlands, and United Kingdom, that have much matured impact investing market. I'm going to mention Brazil particularly because there's a lot of semblance with Nigeria. Over 200 million population, a high percentage of people living in multi-dimensional poverty. They have done several strategies, poverty reduction strategies, that have worked to some extent. However, in 2018, they passed the first policy recognizing impact investing as an investment strategy. What did that do for them? I'll just tell you a little bit of it. Prior to that time, impact capital was rather low in Brazil. We see a spike in total asset under management for impact investing, reaching 785 million US dollars, compared to Nigeria, which is about 4.7 million. And interestingly, only 34 investors, local investors, are deploying $785 million. In Nigeria, you have development finance institutions deploying 80% of the 4.7 billion. Not enough private sectors can do it. And if you look at the private sector, we have all the resources, but we need the government to unlock opportunities for impact investing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for that impact investing perspective. I could see Ifosa was agreeing with you for the most part. So we've come to the point in the debate where Mrs. Uwais and Mr. Ifosa will kind of have a rebuttal for about 10 minutes. Just for the audience, those of you who are here with us and those of you who are tuning in online, we have the same poll that we asked you, We want to see if things have changed from the beginning of the session to the end. So please make sure that you participate on that online poll. So Mrs. Uwais and Mr. Ifosa, you have 10 minutes to rebut or agree with what was shared by the speakers. And then we will then take some questions from the audience and wrap this session up in about 20 minutes. So Ifosa and Mrs. Uwais, you have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, so who first?
Well,
First?
First,
who,
you have
who
the
goes
floor.
first?
Ifosa, please go first. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Those comments were inspiring. I want to just quickly tell 3 stories because we are getting to the end of this. When I started this work, I started a nonprofit organization. I raised tens of thousands of dollars and I went into poor communities, much like the ones that Mrs. Away works to help. And I found out in these communities there was no water. And so I took the money I was raising as a nonprofit and we built wells. 6 months after we built the wells broke. I had to figure out a way to get somebody to go in and fix the wells. After I built about 5 wells and virtually all of them broke, I stopped building wells. Now, here's the conundrum. If someone said there was no value in what I was doing, they would be wrong. There was value. I was building wells. People had the wells for 6 months, maybe a year. But was that the best thing I could do with the resources I had? The investment I was making, the social investments I was making in the community was treating the symptoms. It was not getting at the root cause. I did not understand the mechanism that creates sustainable prosperity that would help lift people out of poverty. So that's the first thing. I do think these social investments, they are having some kind of impact, but I'm afraid we are building wells in communities, metaphorically speaking, when we can be doing a lot more, or at least different kind of work. That's why the paradigm shift has to happen. The second thing, and I apologize, my sister who spoke first, I forget her name, referenced some World Bank studies about cash transfers. I'm afraid it is unfortunate that we have to have the preeminent organization in the world that works on poverty programs, give a bunch of people who are poor money, spend millions of dollars studying the people who have this money to sort of figure out whether it's working or not. Of course, when you give poor people money, their lives are going to improve. That's not the question we should be asking. The lives of rich people is better than the lives of poor people. We have access to healthcare, education, and so on. So why are we spending millions of dollars studying whether the poor people would drink with the money? Or poor people are not stupid. They're simply poor. If we give them money, their lives will improve. The diversity of food they eat will improve. The consumption will increase. What we need to be thinking about is how do we make it sustainable? We don't have the money to give out cash transfers in Nigeria. She compared with social programs in the US and other countries. We spent $200 per year per citizen. I keep saying that, but these countries that we are comparing with are spending $20,000, $30,000 per year. They have enterprise creating value that are being taxed. We don't. That is the mechanism. We have to find that mechanism for Nigeria. If we don't, we will continue to metaphorically build wells that only last for 6 months. We would make some progress, but we will still be poor in 10, 20, 30 years from now. The last thing I want to say is this. All of us who are listening to this are probably part of the elite in Nigeria. In sessions like this, oftentimes we walk away and there is no direct action we can take to help Nigeria be better. Today, I want to give you one that is very simple, at least for you. Many of us probably have drivers and nannies, and we go to restaurants and we get served by waiters. If you truly care about eradicating poverty in Nigeria, if you pay your driver less than 50,000 naira a month, double his or her salary. If you pay your nanny less than that, double their salary. The next time you go to a restaurant and you spend 100,000 naira on a meal with a friend, give a 20% tip. These are ways that we can start to make progress on alleviating poverty in Nigeria. Thank you.
Let's definitely clap for that. Thank you, Ifosa. It definitely does start with us, for sure. So, Mrs. Uwais, you have 5 minutes to respond to what Ifosa has said. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Efosa and Sutura and Maria for their contributions, and I agree that government doesn't have the money, all the money, but I think government has a responsibility. So it has to budget for poverty alleviation, even because of those that are too far down the line, they're unable to lift themselves. So unlike what Maria said, I have seen 5,000 naira making a difference. I've seen loans given to women, 18,000 plus of them, and I said less than 500 of them defaulted. And today they're on their own. So please let's not trivialize what's happening. The same Brazil, the same China, all have pro-poor programs. They all had school feeding programs. They had cash transfer programs in addition to the impact investing. And I really believe in impact investing. I believe in social entrepreneurs. I believe we need to move away from CSR and move to where it's a win-win situation for people who have the compassion and who have the skills to support those that don't, you know, and in spaces where it's unbelievable, the lives that they live. It's not something we can even fathom from Abuja or from Lagos. But when we go into the communities and we see what they're enduring, you will know that even 1,000 naira makes a difference. So I would like to say we need to work together, lift people up to a level where they can engage with whatever else is available, the infrastructure, the programs, the fintechs. There are many places where we don't have internet. So we need to support people to be able to engage and even understand the benefits of investing in banks, because they don't. It's very easy. People don't understand why early marriage is a problem, so we need to draw the linkages, and there has to be a lot of communication at that level for people to understand how they can lift themselves, they can help themselves out of these, the dark spaces that they believe they live in now. But as a consensus, I would say we need to get together and work together to try and lift that. It can be done. I have that belief. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Uwais. It absolutely can be done.
Thank you.
And I definitely agree that collaboration between the different stakeholders is paramount to really lifting 34 million Nigerians out of poverty. Thank you very much, Mrs. Uwais, and thank you, Mr. Ifosa. No, please stay on. We still have 10 minutes, so sorry. We have some questions from the audience, and I'd like the audience members to please signify. Unfortunately, I'll only be able to take 2 questions from the audience. Or maybe I'll take 3 from the audience and 2 from online, just to make it fair. I've noted everybody that would like to take a question. Okay. So I would like to start off by an online question first, and we will take the rest later. So Ehi Abumere from Lagos has a question, and he says, should social protection be designed as a program or a system, parallel system, working concurrently? As we tax, we redirect to subsidized living. So I think the question is trying to ask, should social protection be designed as a program or a system parallel to what we do already with taxation? I don't know if anybody would like to take that question. Maybe we'll go to the next one. Here is Fatima Haruna asking, social investment programs are good but not sustainable. However, creating jobs, factories, and providing an enabling environment is more, I think these are more comments than questions. So this seems to be a question. The United Kingdom just reduced the universal credits and increased national living wage. The government wants more people to come out from benefits and work for a living. Is this not something that Nigeria should be encouraged in Nigeria? Shouldn't we replace the 1-year National Youth Service with a 1 National Skills Acquisition Program? That's a pretty good question. Would you like to answer that?
I believe the NYSC is already organizing skills in the camps. There are a lot of engagements, interventions happening. But I mean, the skills that need to be, the interventions relating to skills need to be across board. There are many that have never been in school. As I said, there are too many that have never been in school, and they don't have the opportunities that many have that have been in school. So I think we need to diversify and go into go to other youth and engage them and ensure that we provide the wide range of opportunities to them, because the numbers that go to the youth corps, that go through youth corps are very small compared to the needs. Thank you.
To take an audience question, Honorable Minister of FCT, kindly tell us your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's going to be a contribution if you allow me. In the last 1 hour or so, we've had very robust discussion as to which is the right way to go. Quite frankly, there is no right way. Each country develops at its own pace, and you have to look at it in real contextual matter. Obviously, government has to play a role in terms of providing the initial incentive, a kind of you have to start somewhere. And I think what Mariam West, my sister, is doing is tremendous, particularly the social register. Because without the social register, you cannot even understand the enormity and the quantum of the problem at hand. But obviously, social intervention, the way we are doing now, is basically just a stopgap arrangement. It's not sustainable. It's not something that can be funded on a very long-term basis. So that's why we all have to go back to the private sector, to productivity, and also productivity generating consumption. And that's why there's a factor which I believe has not been discussed at length here. And that's, what do we do as a people? Because even if you incentivize the private sector and make them produce, as long as we do not patronize them and we do not buy made in Nigerian goods, we are just going to continue. Because if you look at the enormity of resources we use, importing fabrics, importing furniture, importing the mobile phones that we use, importing the clothes that we wear, including the shoes, the wristwatches and so on, that's enormous resources. And every country had to take a decision at one point or the other to close what they were doing and look inwards. 30 years ago, China insisted that everybody must buy made in China if you are Chinese. And if you are a private sector person, they frown at you. Now you go to China, they have billionaires. And now they have been able to create a consumption population that now buys their goods and even is so affluent that they are able to buy foreign goods. So now we have to decide as a people, if we really want to take multiples of Nigerians out of poverty, then we have to go back to made in Nigeria goods. We have to incentivize the manufacturing sector. And for us to do that, we have to just decide, all of us here, stop importing, stop wearing foreign fabrics, including you, and her, and me. And then, for instance, I understand we have made in Nigeria mobile phones now, so let's forget about the iPhones, the Samsungs, and buy made in Nigeria. So this is the crux of the matter. China went through it. Japan went through it. Incidentally, Mariam and I were classmates 1977 to 1980, and she recalled we studied history together, and we read what happened in Japan when they decided to shut down the country and said that was after the Second World War. No, First World War, Second World War, I'm not sure. So this is the way we have to go. So the government has to play a role, the private sector plays a role, but more importantly, we as the Nigerians, we also have to play a tremendous role. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for that very good point. Made in Nigeria is really the way to grow the economy. And I just wanted to make a point that this suit is actually made in Nigeria. So, all right. So I'm going to come over. We have one question. We have 6 minutes to end the session. Please make it quick. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, everybody. My name is Awal. Standing on existing protocol. I wish the minister would have been the one to respond last, so at least we can hear from him. The truth of the matter, I think we have been too academic. And that's the problem when we read too much books. And for me, I wish there's a better dialect that we can communicate to each other without the use of English. Because it seems when you speak in slangs and tongues and what have you, you're understood and taken more serious better. But the truth of the matter, I think we need to redefine what the federal government are calling poverty alleviation. Perhaps maybe a social welfare that tends to address your immediate poverty need. Because Nigeria, like Efosa said, is a poor country. So being a poor country, then obviously government has a responsibility to address those who are the underprivileged in a social welfare program. Now, one thing Efosa need to understand, what he's talking about, the private sector participation and investment is about employment creation. That is where they come. Government can only be enablers. So the two must work together, hand in hand. No matter, just like the minister said, no matter what you are producing, even if you are selling it at 1 naira, if the people who are buying, they don't have the right purchasing power, there's no way they will buy it. So we must start somewhere. Yesterday, what I have learned from the Prime Minister of Ethiopia says that at least one step at a time. Being a poor country, I remember SLS once said that when he was a CBN governor, he talked about poverty, living below poverty line. But he did not really understand poverty in reality till when he became an emir. Sorry, 1 second. And then people queued, and then he had a very loud shout. A woman was crying simply because she wants to take her baby to hospital and was looking for financial support. How much is that money? 3,000 naira. And
Thank
then
you, sir. I'm so
unfortunately, the
sorry,
baby
but I'm
died.
going to have
So
to cut
truly,
you because we
need-
have 3 minutes left. And
Okay, so
perhaps
we need
can,
an alignment between what the
perhaps we
government
can
is
carry
doing
this
and what the private
on
government
after.
do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Just for gender balance, I'd like to get a question from a female. So please, let's get your name and your question in 30 seconds, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Udoaki Baker. I'm the Africa Regional Manager for the Scaling Up Nutrition Business Network.
I can't hear you.
My name is Udoaki Baker. I'm the Africa Regional Manager for the Scaling Up Nutrition Business Network, and I work for GAIN. Now, my question is, usually we see that social protection programs are closely tied with livelihoods.
Yes.
Do we have a strategy in place to graduate people out of our
Exit
social...
strategies.
Yes, in Nigeria. And could you tell us a little bit about that? Thank you.
So the cash transfer...
in 1 minute. Thank you.
Yes. The cash transfer program did have exit strategies for graduating people, amounts that were given to the youth, the ESO program. All of that is amounts decided. Actually, a lot of research went into how much was required and to enable them actually take ownership and do something productive after the training. So there are always exit strategies, but of course, some of the things have been delayed because of the paucity of funds and all of that, which comes back to the impact investing. The challenge is sometimes the amounts that are required are too expensive. This is the problem. But government money is free. Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Uwais.
Thank you.
Thank you for
I
your
can
points.
leave now.
Yes, so let's put our hands together for Mrs. Uwais. Thank you very much for your great points. Mr. Ifosa Ojomo, thank you for joining us virtually. Let's put our hands together for, oh yes, so actually, Mrs. Uwais, we need to take a picture
We would
before
like you
you
to come
leave.
back.
So,
Please join the anchor.
yes, please, all the speakers, please kindly join me on stage.
Please. Thank you. We'd like to invite the Honorable Minister of the FCT So please also join us here. So that at least you can represent men. He's a very blessed man. Thank you very much. Thank you. And so in a few minutes, we will be having the honor of hosting His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And then we'll be moving towards the closing formalities of this two-day conference. But before then, my technical people upstairs have a few videos to keep us engaged.